After the loss had already happened, a new message arrived promising recovery, then turned into a scam that took even more money from the same victims. The contact came as a solution, offering help to trace funds, recover losses, or take legal action. They claimed to be investigators, recovery agents, or specialists working with authorities. Victims were told their case had been identified and that recovery was possible with the right process. Then came the requirement: upfront fees for investigation, legal filing, or fund release. Some paid again, believing this was their chance to recover what they had already lost. Across countries, recovery scams have taken millions by targeting people already affected by previous scams. What felt like a second chance was actually a continuation of the same system under a different name. During the late 2010s and early 2020s, recovery scams expanded globally as data from previous scams began circulating among fraud networks. Victims who had already lost money became primary targets, identified through leaked lists, hacked databases, or shared contacts. The approach often appeared official, with emails, calls, or messages referencing previous losses with specific details. Scammers presented themselves as recovery agents, legal firms, cybersecurity specialists, or government-linked investigators. Targets included individuals from the United States, the United Kingdom, Europe, Australia, and parts of Asia. In many cases, the same networks responsible for the original scam were also behind the recovery attempts. Reports from agencies like the OAIC and FTC highlighted increasing complaints related to recovery fraud. Losses ranged from additional hundreds to tens of thousands, often layered on top of previous financial damage. By the time victims engaged, they believed they were dealing with specialists offering a legitimate path to recover funds. The contact usually began with a message referencing the previous scam, often including details that made the case feel known and active. Victims were told their funds had been traced or frozen and could be recovered through a formal process. The communication used legal or technical language, reinforcing the idea that this was part of an official recovery effort. Documents were sometimes provided, including case files, transaction reports, or recovery agreements that appeared structured and legitimate. Victims were guided through steps that mirrored legal or investigative procedures. The process felt different from the original scam, more formal, more controlled, and focused on resolution. Because the loss had already occurred, the motivation to recover funds made the offer highly persuasive. The narrative shifted from opportunity to recovery, reducing skepticism and increasing compliance. By the time the process was explained fully, the victim believed there was a real chance of getting their money back. Once engaged, the process moved into staged recovery steps where progress appeared structured and ongoing. Victims were told that funds had been identified in specific accounts or held by intermediaries awaiting release. They were provided timelines, case updates, and procedural explanations to maintain confidence in the process. Then the first payment was introduced, often described as a legal fee, processing cost, or recovery charge. The amount was framed as necessary to initiate or unlock the recovery process. After payment, updates continued, reinforcing the belief that progress was being made. Additional fees followed, each one presented as a required step to move the case forward. In many cases, These payments escalated over time as the recovery appeared closer to completion. By this stage, the victim was financially re-engaged in a system that mirrored the structure of the original scam. As the process continued, new obstacles were introduced, often framed as legal or administrative requirements. Victims were told that funds were ready but required clearance through taxes, compliance checks, or international transfer approvals. Each request appeared structured, supported by documents, emails, or official-looking notices. The communication remained consistent, with regular updates to maintain confidence and urgency. If delays occurred, explanations were provided to justify additional steps and prevent withdrawal from the process. Some were told their recovery amount had increased, requiring higher fees to match the new value. Others were guided through multiple payment stages over several days or weeks. Because the process felt official, each payment was seen as moving closer to recovering the original loss. By this stage, the system had extended the scam into a second cycle, built entirely on the promise of recovery. Doubt usually returned when promised recovery deadlines passed without any funds being received. Victims began questioning the process, especially after multiple payments produced no measurable result. Attempts to verify the recovery agency or legal firm often revealed no legitimate registration or connection. Some contacted real authorities and discovered that no official recovery process had been initiated on their behalf. Communication from the scammers often shifted, becoming slower or introducing new explanations for delays. Requests for refunds were ignored or met with additional fees framed as final steps. Authorities, including the OAIC and the ACTC, have warned about these exact patterns. By the time the situation was confirmed, victims had lost additional money beyond the original scam. What initially felt like a second chance quickly unraveled into a continuation of the same fraudulent system. The scam was typically uncovered after victims reported the interaction to banks, regulators, or law enforcement when recovery failed. Across countries, reports showed consistent patterns: contact after loss, staged case files, and repeated fee requests. Agencies like the FCA, FTC, and ASIC identified these as coordinated recovery fraud operations. Investigations revealed that victim data from earlier scams was reused or sold to target the same individuals again. Digital analysis showed cloned legal documents, spoofed identities, and rotating contact details to avoid detection. Financial tracking indicated that payments were routed through multiple accounts and rapidly dispersed across jurisdictions. In some cases, links were found between the original scam networks and the recovery operations. Public advisories were issued, warning that legitimate authorities do not charge upfront fees to recover funds. What appeared to be independent recovery services was ultimately identified as a system designed to extend the life cycle of fraud. What made this scam effective was the timing. It reached people at the moment they were most vulnerable, after a loss. Victims were not chasing opportunity. They were trying to recover what had already been taken. The system replaced urgency with hope, using structured communication and official language to build trust again. Because the loss was already real, the promise of recovery felt credible and necessary. Investigations showed that the same structure was reused globally, targeting victims across different scam types. This allowed the scam to scale while remaining highly persuasive to those already affected. The financial damage often doubled, with victims losing money in both the original and recovery scams. For many, the realization came only after repeated payments produced no result. The pattern remains active today, evolving with new identities, but relying on the same core mechanism of turning loss into further loss.